My father used to ask, at a time when entire families were being murdered during the Holocaust, why was I so lucky not only to have survived personally, but to have done so with my entire immediate family intact? You see, my father, Casimir Biebers, was a survivor of the Holocaust and a resistance fighter. And because he so freely talked to his family about his experiences as a child in the Warsaw Ghetto, his story is easily told.
The Holocaust, also known as the Shoah, was the World War II genocide of the European Jews. Between 1939 and 1945, across German-occupied Europe, Nazi Germany and its collaborators systematically murdered 6 million Jews, around 2/3 of Europe's Jewish population. 1.5 million were children. As time passes, those who survive the final solution are quickly fading into history. Soon, there will no longer be eyewitness testimony to the evil of Adolf Hitler and his henchmen. During the genocide, when prisoners knew they would not survive, their last plea was for those who would survive to tell their stories to their children. Let future generations know that they lived. Today, that responsibility falls upon the second generation of the Holocaust survivors. Generation to Generation is a new documentary series in which the torch of remembrance is passed to the children and grandchildren of survivors, whose turn it is to share with subsequent generations. Painful stories to share, but testimony that needs to be passed on to future generations. Otherwise, history can and will repeat itself. And if that happens, the lessons passed on by the survivors will extinguish like the flame on a candle.
Well, my name is Thomas Biebers, and my father, Casimir Biebers, was a Holocaust survivor. What's interesting about him, if you were to see him walking down the street or he introduced himself to you, you would have no idea that he was a survivor of the Holocaust. Number one, great sense of humor. He had a tremendous outlook on life. He took every day one step at a time. He was very happy and very go-lucky person. Only if he got to know you would he ever give any indication of his life in the Holocaust, and only as it pertained to the resistance. For me, though, I'm lucky in the sense that he told me all his stories, so now I can share them to you.
Cas was born on March 16, 1931, in Warsaw, Poland. His father, Sigmund, was a wealthy publisher and a maker of fine china. His mother, Irina, was a chemist. Along with his brother Thaddeus, the Biebers family had a very opulent and luxurious life before the war.
Before the war, my father had a great life. He was surrounded by all kinds of animals. He had lambs and chickens and dogs. He had an older brother named Thaddeus, who I called Uncle Tad. They had lived in a 30-room mansion in Warsaw with servants, cooks, nannies, not to mention the multiple apartments throughout Poland, as well as a summer house in the Baltic Sea. So for a little boy before the war, I think the Biebersteins gave a very nice life for their sons.
On Friday, September 1st, 1939, the Biebersteins' aristocratic lifestyle would change. An 8-year-old Cass is immersed in a dark life he never could have envisioned in his wildest dreams.
The Bieberstein family was actually checking into a hotel up in the Baltic Sea on September 1st, 1939. Kind of, like a final summer bliss. They had given the chauffeur the day off because he'd asked for it, so my grandfather drove the family himself. While checking in, my father hears what's like a thunder in the sky. It was so loud, the hotel was shaking. Runs outside, looks up in the sky, and it's pitch black with aircraft. 8-year-old little boy has no clue what he's seeing. All he starts hearing the distance explosions and screaming and fire bursts. At the counter, they hear on the radio that Germany is attacking Poland. So my grandfather gathers up his children and his wife, hauls off to get back to Warsaw, which is 30 miles from where they were at. Along the way, there's a stuka, which is, I don't know if you've heard what those things, they have the screaming sound, piercing sound as they're coming in. Strafing the car, he unloads his bomb on them. It lands about 3-4 feet in front of him, and my father said, I don't know whether it was just stupid luck or there was divine intervention, but it did not detonate. They get back to the house, everybody's hysterical, they're screaming. So you are an 8-year-old little boy just about to check in for your last big hurrah before school starts, and now you're fearing for your life.
For almost 30 days, the Polish army held the Germans back. But after intense bombing and shelling, Poland would surrender to Germany on September 27, 1939.
Well, in the very early stages of the war, my grandfather actually makes it out to use his influence to get out of Poland and makes it to the United States, with the hope of bringing his family back with him. But obviously it doesn't happen. When Germany finally makes it into Poland after the Polish army capitulates, that's when they start seeing things like Star Davids on their lapels, Jewish stores are ransacked, businesses are broken into, Jewish people are forced to walk on the street when a German soldier walks past them. Now they're starting to see anti-Semitism coming from the Polish people they never anticipated. People who were envious of their lifestyle now were trying to take advantage of my family's downfall. So that started taking place. Also, it really angered some of the Jews were people called capos. Capos were actually Jewish traitors. These were Jewish police who were walking around with nice uniforms, so they could earn an extra loaf of bread or water, but they were turning in Jews. These are Jews turning in Jews or doing the beatings themselves because Germans didn't want to get their hands dirty. What really changed my father's perspective on everything was an occurrence meeting with one Oskar Schindler. The Oskar Schindler that's portrayed in the movie is not the Oskar Schindler my father remembers. The chauffeur that I talked about earlier was actually a Nazi. He actually brings Oskar Schindler to the house, who the Germans had actually wanted that house for many years. That's what they wanted it. It was Oskar Schindler walks into the house with a German officer and said, "You have 10 minutes to vacate and get out." My grandmother, who was very smart, let's just gather us what we can and leave. My father doesn't want to go. He said, I'm not, he had a lot of pets and things. He said, I'm not going. And Schindler said, you have no choice. You have to, get out. My father said, well, I have a dog, a little dachshund dog he called Fufai. Schindler said, you have to go. My father said, well, I'm not leaving without my dog. So Schindler himself takes a pistol from his entourage next to him and shoots the dog right in front of my father. So now, kills him. Now you have no choice but to go. It is that moment, that 20-minute interaction, my father went from an 8-year-old little boy to wanting to fight back.
After moving from one apartment to the next, Cass and his family are eventually forced into the Jewish ghetto in Warsaw in 1942.
Well, the true hero, I think, in the Bieberstein survival is my grandmother, Irina Bieberstein. She had this amazing sixth sense about her. If she told her sons to run, don't hesitate. Another thing that she did, she used her influence. She still had quite a bit of political influence and financial wherewithal to get her sons into work camps, armament factories, building rifles and hand grenades for the Germans, which actually was my father's first taste of fighting back. Non-violently, but he fought back. And how did he fight back? For example, he worked in manufacturing rifles. The Germans would inspect, let's say, hypothetically, every 10th rifle or 11th rifle. That's the rifle that would actually fire. The children, these are Jewish children now, knew enough to file down the firing pins of the other rifles. So when a German soldier was on the Eastern or Western Front facing their adversaries, want to use their rifle, it doesn't fire. Another way in which he fought back was the hand grenades. I don't know if you know anything about German hand grenades, but they're called potato mashers. They're big, long things like this. They had a 12-second fuse on them, 12, 13-second fuse. A lot of time. Same story. Every maybe 6th, 7th hand grenade is the one that has a 12-second fuse. The rest of them, 1 second, 2 second, 3-second fuse. So when the German pulls it on wherever he's faced, whatever enemy he's facing, it detonates. So that's the first way of resistance and rebellion. And again, Irina Bieberstein is the one that led that charge.
In the fall of 1942, Cass and his brother decide to fight back in the only way they know how. They both officially joined the Jewish resistance organization known as Zab, founded by 20-year-old Mordecai Anilevich. Cass, not even 12 years old, was angry about the recent escalation of Nazi activity in the ghetto, and he was ready for a fight.
My father once told me that he was not going to go down without a fight. When my father became part of the Zab, his small size and ability to shoot made him perfect for sniping. Everyone understood that when a German is killed in the ghettos, that there would be a very violent response. For every Nazi killed, the payment would be the blood of 10 Jews, mostly children. But that did not stop my father and others from fighting back. To do nothing was not acceptable. As my father once said, the Nazis took away my childhood and killed my dog, and justice needed to be served.
On April 19, 1943, the eve of Passover, the German forces, under the command of SS General Stroop, intended to begin the liquidation of the Warsaw Ghetto. When the SS and the police units entered the ghetto that morning, the streets were deserted.
Well, the Warsaw Ghetto Uprising starts on April 19, 1943, under the command of General Stroop, which was a SS officer in charge of the liquidation of the ghettos. He comes in to a deserted streets. There's nobody there. Silence, almost deafening silence. Unbeknownst to him, what waited a few blocks down the road were a band of boys, girls, ages from 8 to 21, 22, maybe on the high end, with confiscated rifles, Molotov cocktails, hand grenades, whatever weapons they could generate. And this was a militarily armed resistance. This was just not a bunch of renegade street fighters. These were trained resistance fighters who who worked at this for months on end to fight back. The shooting starts. Germans lose within the first 10, 15 minutes. 8 of their troops go down. 43 are wounded. They have to pull back. Again, against the Jews, of all people. So my father was very happy with that. He picked up a rifle. He fought back. He resisted. He was a spotter. One thing he was really proud of is that, eventually the rebellion would fall to defeat. The Germans would liquidate the ghettos. They would burn us out. They pulled us out. They made sure that we felt the brutality of what was to come. But we decided, you know what? We're going to die anyways. Let's not go down without a fight. And that's one reason why we wrote a book called Not Without a Fight. It's a story of how my father persevered during not only the Warsaw Ghetto Uprising, but the Holocaust in general.
Author of the book, Not Without a Fight, The Story of a Polish Jew's Resistance, D.W. Duke.
I met Cass through his son, Tom. Tom had been telling me about his family a little bit. We both have Bieberstein ancestry. And Tom began telling me about his father and the fact that he was actually was in the Holocaust, not just in the Holocaust, but he was actually a resistance fighter. And the more we talked, the more we became interested in the idea of writing a book to share the story. And I met Cass. I think I met him at a restaurant first time. And I was impressed with Cass. He was a person who had been through a lot, but he had learned in life to what was important and what was not important, I think would be a good way to say it. And as a result, he was just a very direct, straightforward, but humble guy. I liked Cass. Yeah, there were so many things that he said that became real as he described them. There was one story he told about when he was standing with some other children across the street, and there was a sergeant who helped him escape a crowd that was going to be taken to Treblinka, and he helped Cass escape. And as he told me that story, I thought just, how precarious things were for these little children. At that time, he would have been maybe 10, I think, maybe 11. And just that description was very profound. It was very important to Cass that people knew that the Jewish people fought back. Many of them fought back, and we don't see that in Hollywood. And Cass really wanted people to know that. He said, I wanted them to know that we fought, and we fought well. He said, one thing he told me that really impressed me was, he said, if you corner an animal and the animal knows it's either going to die, believes it's going to die, and it has a choice at that point to either fight or just submit. And he said, we knew we were going to die, so that's why we decided to fight back. I think there would be two important messages that Cass would want to share. Number one is that the story of the Holocaust needs to be told, because so many young people today have so little information about history. And that's why we would put it in a dramatization, so that they can actually see it in a story they'll identify with and will appreciate, as opposed to reading it from a history book. So Cass would say, be sure to pass the story on to as many people as you can so that we don't repeat it. And then the second message, I think he didn't use the word identity politics, but he was very troubled when people were singled out for some reason and then discriminated against. Remember the old Pink Floyd album, Us and Them song, how you take people and you find something different about them, and then you use that as a basis to discriminate against them. And that was really what gave rise to the Holocaust. I think that would be Cass's other messages. Don't do that. That's not a good thing for your society.
The Bieberstein post-war journey would take them from Poland to Sweden and eventually to New York in 1947. Cass would become a U.S. citizen in 1952. Due to the possibility that Nazi sympathizers might seek retaliation for his activities as a resistance fighter, Cass changed his name to Biebers. He would spend the next few years living in New York with his family, but trauma from the Holocaust made assimilation difficult.
Well, my father eventually makes that uppull in 1947 to Sweden. So he goes from Sweden to the United States. In the United States, he becomes a citizen in 1952. He was very rebellious, very hard to control. Keep in mind, his childhood and his teenage years was not a typical childhood and teenager years. He was fighting for his life. He was killing. He saw death on an everyday basis. So when he comes to the United States, my family decides we need to send him to Canada to kind of calm him down, send a border patrol up there. So he goes there, gets the wits about him, graduates high school, comes back to New York. That's where he starts raising a family and things of that nature. But he was always kind of, I would say, cautious about what he was doing and where he was at. Reason he changed his name to Biebers instead of Bieberstein is because he feared that the people he resisted against would find him in the United States. So it was more, he was still, I would say, apprehensive, even in his early or adult years.
I met Cass in January 1960. I was a flight attendant for United Airlines, and I was coming in from a flight. It was a blinding snowstorm, and I was concerned about how we were going to get home. And my companion, the other flight attendant, said, well, I have this great guy, he's really funny, and he's going to be taking us home. He's got a station wagon and he can handle all the baggage and everything. So that's how I met Cass. We had a wonderful time in the 1960s because I had passes from United Airlines so we could travel all over the world. And Cass spoke 5 different languages. And we thoroughly enjoyed going to Russia and to Israel, all over the place, and going to great restaurants in New York and the concerts. And I was especially happy because he took me to, in fact, as a matter of fact, our first date was to the opera to see La Boheme. So it made a great impression on me because I enjoyed classical music. And it was very free, and Cass seemed to, he enjoyed life, and he didn't let the little things bother him at all. Like I would be carried away about finances or anything else. Nothing bothered him. He was just a happy person and had a lot of friends, and we had a great life. But we decided to come to California because it would be better for the children. I was from La Jolla, and Cass was sort of pressured to work on his family business in New York, which was plywood distributor selling plywood. And he had a degree from the Academy of Aeronautics and wanted to work in aeronautics. But he couldn't do that there. It was just too much pressure. And besides, we just wanted to come to California. It was a great life, you know, the California sunshine and all. And my daughter was born here, and her name is Irina, named after her grandmother, Irina Bieberstein. And we lived only a 10-minute walk from the beach. The school district was great. And we just, a different world, different life, and it was thoroughly enjoyable. We were all happy. I think the message Cass would like to share is to never forget.
When I first met my father-in-law, I see him as a happy-go-lucky man. He loves to joke around, he loves to talk, and the fun part is when I'm around him, he loves to joke around with me. And I fire back at him and joke around with him too, and all we do is have fun and laugh together. When my father-in-law found out that I was a Catholic, he was so excited to tell me that when him and his brother were running away from the SS, a Catholic priest was the one who saved them. And the Catholic priest saved them by hiding them under the altar. My father-in-law wants me to share the world that the Holocaust did exist. Because a lot of people are talking about it, and they said that Holocaust was a hoax, but it's not. He was the living proof of it. And he wants me to tell the world that, especially his grandkids, he wants me to educate his grandkids and great-grandkids how the Holocaust happened. And he doesn't want them to forget about it. And it's kind of hard for me to say, but he wants me to tell them that he was a Holocaust survivor, and they went through a lot by trying to run away from the SS. And I'm glad that I met him. He's the best person I ever met.
The Holocaust is not bound by a few years in the mid-20th century. Anti-Semitism, homophobia, Islamophobia, xenophobia, and racism are not bound to the pages of history. They're ideologies that are as real today as they were during the Third Reich. Jews, gypsies, homosexuals, and others deemed subhuman by the Nazis must be remembered. If we fail to remember, we risk allowing it to happen again. When another evil ideology deems some people not worthy to be considered part of the human family. Genocide does not take place on its own. It is a steady process, which begins when discrimination, racism, and hatred are ignored by society. If we close the books to the past, then both the present and future generations are bound to repeat the horrors of their ancestors.
If my father was here today, I think he would probably be disgusted at what's going on in the world today. If you believe that what happened 75 years ago cannot happen today, you're completely oblivious to what's happening on TV as we speak. So I think he'd be upset that the lessons learned during the Holocaust is not being reciprocated today. My role as a part of the second generation is to keep that memory alive, let everybody know that it can happen again. And if we don't listen, and if we allow racism and anti-Semitism and Islamophobia, all these things to manifest, if we don't speak up against it, then it's our fault if genocide continues. And I think that's what he'd want me to do, is to tell that story so that their memory is remembered and the atrocities don't continue in the future.
You're with us everywhere we go. We hold you safely in our hearts. We'll share with future generations all the lessons of your past, all your suffering and losses, all the pain that you went through will never be forgotten at 6-2. We'll tell your story, live your dreams, and sing your
Everyone has a story that is yet to be told. Every life is a journey with many chapters to unfold. Moments filled with joy, moments full of pain, lessons to be learned, sometimes over and over again. So before you leave, before you go, there's so much more of you I need to know. So share with me your legacy, every memory you own. Don't hold back for fear of tears. Share the wisdom of your years. Let us honor who you are and what you've seen. Let us honor all you've done and who you've been. For the loving listeners waiting, let the silence fall away. Your life is worth celebrating. Tell your story every day. Don't hold back for fear of tears. Share the wisdom of your years. All the whispers of your past will sing out loud. Bearing witness to your heart will make you proud. And you will live forever in the hearts and in the minds of those you leave behind as a smile. Leave your legacy of life, your legacy of love, and we will smile.